Lions training camp already here upon us. But I want to stick with this NFL Top 100 list because we brought up Jared Goff, but the conversation at least I have seen after this ranking has come out is people flustered and frustrated and confused why Jared Goff made this list, or at least was ranked higher on this list than guys like Lamar Jackson or a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Because I'll tell you this, if we're going off 5-year projections, I would take Trevor Lawrence. I agree with that. I think Trevor Lawrence, as he continues to grow in the NFL, is going to only get better and better and better. So, but this ranking isn't based on projection. This is based off last season. They've already made that clear with guys like Geno Smith on this list. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson's on this list, so clearly it's based off last year. And you cannot make an argument to me that Jared Goff shouldn't be ranked over Lamar and Trevor. I know it sounds weird. It sounds, what? Lamar's an MVP winner. What did he do last season? I'll wait. Because I love Lamar. I'll defend him. But if you're going off last season, there is no argument, Sam Flannel, that Jared Goff should not be ranked above those guys. If you want to go which player is more dynamic, of course, Lamar, you're going to take Lamar. And I would argue Lamar has more passing touchdowns in his MVP year than Jared's ever had in his career. But that was when? Was that last season?
2019.
No, it wasn't.
2019.
So that's why I'm perfectly okay with Jared Goff being ranked above those guys. But because people tend to get that confused. Trevor Lawrence, what? He's in the 90s. He had a great season, but he will, as his career continues as he continues to grow in the NFL, he will be higher on this list. But I don't think right now he deserves to be, Sam Flannel.
Interesting angle, Jeff Eifrady. I will give you that because I'm usually a guy who likes to look at numbers. And Jared Goff, by the numbers, he had more touchdown passes than Trevor Lawrence. He certainly had more than Lamar Jackson, who himself missed 5 games, and that definitely hurt him on this list because I think he was on pace to have his best season as a thrower, but he got hurt. And that's the type of things that happen to a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who is such a dynamic runner. But I don't think it is just solely based on last season. And even if it was, the fact that Trevor Lawrence is 96 and Jared Goff was 66, I think is malfeasance at this point. I think you got to be dipping into some of that dispo stuff. And I'm not saying that you said that Trevor Lawrence at 96 is right. If you want to say that Trevor Lawrence may be a little bit below Jared Goff, I can listen to that argument, but I will not do that. Because Trevor Lawrence last season, he completely broke out after having a terrible rookie year. And one of the most impressive things about Trevor Lawrence, and when I say this, I obviously have to have a caveat, there was a 4-game stretch. One of the games was when they played the Lions and obviously got beat down. That was a total.
James Houston killed a man that day.
Hey, absolutely, like
that is true.
But that was like a total team defeat by for the Jaguars and a total team victory by the Lions. And in that game, Jared Goff outplayed Trevor Lawrence for sure, and the Lions look better. But in those other 3 games, that the Jacksonville Jaguars desperately needed, Trevor Lawrence took over that team and won those games basically by himself, throwing 10 touchdowns and 1 interception. While their defense in those 3 games was allowing 28 points per game, he was leading his offense to 35 points per game. And that also helped kickstart a stretch in which they won 5 in a row to end the season to get into the playoffs, win a playoff game that Trevor Lawrence helped dig the hole that they were in. But the fact that he was able to get out of it and lead them to a comeback victory was absolutely huge. When it comes to Lamar Jackson, that's an interesting one because I think it's a knock on Lamar Jackson that he's only thrown for 3,000 passing yards once in his career, in his MVP season, the same season in which he also broke the record for rushing yards by a QB in a year. So That's a tough one because I have a lot of respect for what Lamar Jackson has accomplished. He's obviously been injured the last couple of years, but he's put together a hell of a resume so far. 101 touchdowns, 38 interceptions, an MVP, 2,000-yard seasons, 4,437 rushing yards, 24 touchdowns, and a 45-16 record as a regular season starter. But Lamar Jackson's biggest knock is he has been an absolutely morbid playoff player, just absolutely awful. 1-3 record, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, has never once had a good playoff game. Jared Goff really hasn't either. But that's beside the point. I think when it comes to this list, it can't just solely be based on last year. I think I think if it was, you could argue that Geno Smith should have been above Jared Goff, but he wasn't because people knew that he was this anomaly like we'd never seen before. A complete draft bust, had one good year, and now he was ranked below Jared Goff, who has proven more in his career than Geno Smith. So I think cachet and skill set does have to play some of a role. So for that reason, Jared Goff should not be ranked ahead of Trevor Lawrence and Lamar Jackson. He should be on this list. I think 66 or 66 is about where he should be, not ahead of those two.
Well, it's the argument I would push back on, at least for Jared Goff, is he was the hottest quarterback to close the season the last 8 games. 15 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, Trevor Lawrence is actually pretty close to that. I think the last 8 he had 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So regardless, it's pretty close, especially how they closed the season. But I like to take into account also team record a little bit. 8-2 to end the season. Not only was Jared one of the hottest quarterbacks to close the season, but on top of that, the Lions were one of the best teams to close the season, going 8-2. So when you look at recency bias and the last thing people have in their heads, it's Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions taking down Green Bay on primetime. It's the last 8 where Jared didn't throw 1 interception and looked really good. Like, although I agree with you, I think on a basic, when you ask a player who puts more fear in your soul, Lamar Jackson or Jared Goff, I think the common answer would be, well, Lamar. He's more dynamic. But I don't think Lamar Jackson, as much as I think in a common year, especially, for example, his MVP year, he would be way higher. Oh, yeah. I don't think you should give a guy flowers for only playing in 12 games and still, 17 passing touchdowns in 12 games. Like, I love Lamar, and I think we can all talk about how dynamic he is, but you can't, and I do think it is based off last season, because to your point, Geno Smith had more touchdown passes, but a little bit of the eyeball test comes into play where okay, well, Jared had 2 less touchdown passes, but he's better than Geno. I don't think Lamar, what he did last season, that doesn't deserve him to be ranked ahead of Goff. Now, if you're mad on where they're ranked, should Trevor be in the 80s, all that stuff, who gives a damn? The point is, I think Trevor and Lamar, as much as I think those guys are rising and will continue to rise, Jared Goff, he deserves it. Like, what he did last season, especially to close the season, Sam, he was if not the hottest quarterback in the NFL to close the season.
It's funny that you mention that, because I think Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence, when it comes to team success, their seasons kind of mirror each other a little bit, because the Jaguars, they started out the year very, 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 very slow, and there was a lot of talk that Trevor Lawrence is a bust. Maybe he can't play, and the fact that he was able to turn it around, they won their last 5 games. Their only real blemish at the end of the year was at Detroit when they absolutely got mollywopped, but when it comes to how they both ended the year, yeah, you're right. You could argue that they were 2 of the hottest quarterbacks, and those were 2 of the hottest teams. So by all those numbers, I would say that their rankings should be maybe more similar than I initially thought. I would still put Trevor Lawrence above him, because when you just look at them play, Trevor Lawrence is eons more talented than Jared Goff. You talk about Jared Goff and the eye test. Sorry, no disrespect. He doesn't wow you with the eye test at all. And I'm somebody who doesn't really look at the eye test as much as others, but Trevor Lawrence his ceiling is a top 2 quarterback in the NFL. I truly believe that. He'll never be number 1. That's Patrick Mahomes for the next 15 years. But number 2, that could be Trevor Lawrence. And I get it. He hasn't done it yet. But he took some major, major, major steps. And you even mentioned in the game at Arrowhead in the playoffs, he wasn't bad. He wasn't great, but, he went toe-to-toe for part of the game.
Yeah. Yes. The game was close. Maybe Trevor didn't light it up, but that Chargers game, and I think that showed a lot of mental fortitude, although, players, if they're voting on quarterbacks, I think some of the players that picked him off, like Asante Samuel, would be voting in this process. So maybe they thought, hey, Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be great, but right now he's not playing at the same level as Jared Goff. And I know that sounds, what? Trevor Lawrence, I think he's better than I get that, and I think he'll be better, but you can't argue, and Sam, you can't argue statistics, right? I think we can all agree there. Jared Goff had more touchdown passes, 2 more interceptions, but the yards were roughly the same. Trevor had 4,100, Jared had almost 4,500. So regardless, although I agree with you, eyeball test, Trevor's 6'6", can move, he's mobile, he's got a cannon, he's poised, all that stuff is great. But Jared Goff, he was the hottest quarterback to end the season. I do think that's why they factor in. We'll see if he can repeat it this year.
And to be fair, and this is I'm a guy who takes in all the information. I can admit when I can almost devil's advocate myself, and I'm about to do that right now.
Yep.
Should Trevor Lawrence get a ton of credit for playing one of the worst first halves I've ever seen from a quarterback and bouncing back from that? I mean, he put them in that hole single-handedly.
Right.
The fact that he's able to bounce back is good, but wouldn't it have been better if he would have just played a good, clean football game from snap one and not had to put his team in a 27-0 hole?
Fair.
Yeah. So I don't want to go too overboard and be like, wow, Trevor Lawrence showed great great fortitude or intestinal fortitude. He also put them in the hole with some of the worst quarterback play I've ever seen in a half, to the point where he looked unrecognizable. I'm like, is that Urban Meyer on the sideline? Did he come in and coach this team and take away all of Trevor Lawrence's powers? So I don't know. I still think he should be above Jared Goff, but Jared Goff did have a great year. I don't want to take anything away from him.
And I get where you're coming from here. Public Enemy says, Jeff, don't forget 324 consecutive passes without an interception. Jake says, oh, yeah, Goff came short against Carolina. Had nothing to do with giving up over 300 yards rushing. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely
I would never say that in a million years.
No, and I think he's referencing another comment.
How you guys are feeling about his impending contract negotiations.
I still feel the same, and this is why I guess, it's good you brought this up, because I think Goff deserves to get more credit than he gets. I think that's one thing. I do feel Goff, people still have this memory in their mind about what Jared looked like post making the Super Bowl. But the guy's 28 years old. He's still, I believe, in quarterbacks you see, like Geno Smith's, 33? He just had a career season.
Yeah.
Like, quarterback, it's not the running back position, guys. Jared Goff's not has bad knees now. Like, he'll be fine. As he gets older, I do think there's a chance that Jared can improve. But this isn't about Jared improving or, Jared's future in Detroit. My problem is the contract. What does the contract look like? Because if I'm Jared Goff, I think he deserves minimum 40 a year because what Daniel Jones got. I'm not saying I would, but I'm just saying if you're looking at Daniel Jones and he got 40, Jared should get 45, 50. He's that much better than Daniel Jones, I believe. So if I'm the Detroit Lions, would I pay him $45, $50 million? I don't think so. And that's not, again, this is why, and if you watch Inside the Den, they took Hendon Hooker and they kept referencing high upside. Upside. You don't draft a quarterback if you think he'll ride the bench his entire career. They think there's a chance Hendon can take over for Jared. Therefore, I'm a little hesitant. I wouldn't pay him that much money, but if Jared comes to the table and says, hey, I want to sign a 2-year extension, roughly a little under 40 or 40 a year, maybe I'll consider it. But I'm not signing a long-term deal with Jared Goff. I think that money should be pushed around to the other players, Amon-Ra, Jonah Jackson, Penei Sewell. I'd rather pay those guys and roll out with Hendon Hooker.
Well, and you know why it's significant now, because we were having these same conversations before the draft, but now there is a clear and present plan if the Lions want to move on from Jared Goff, if they don't want to pay him that long-term deal worth $45 to $50 million a year. They've got Hendon Hooker waiting in the wings, and I don't think Brad Holmes is the type to just let a draft pick on fire. I understand that Jared Goff can go a long way this year in validating what he did last season and showing that he is a huge part of this team's success, and then I would consider giving him more money. But as of right now, Jared Goff has to show me a little bit more, because I'm still not sold on the fact that if you were to bring in like a Hendon Hooker next year, would the offense run almost as seamlessly? Maybe not right away, but within that as the year goes on and maybe at the end of the year. I mean, who knows?
You know what? I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I think the offense, the ceiling raises with Hendon Hooker because of his mobility, because of what he can do. Again, you have a guy who's 6'4", can run when healthy a 4.5, 4.4 speed, has a cannon. Like, there's things that Hendon needs to learn. He's not, Tom Brady coming out of college. He's fine. Like, he's not going to be the greatest quarterback of all time.
That was the first thing that they said when they drafted him. Like, he's gonna do really well behind Jared Goff. He's gonna take his time and he's gonna learn from Jared Goff.
There's still a learning process. Yeah. I don't want to crown the guy like he's ready to start, but you can't tell me after a year of getting healthy and starting and learning the offense and working that you won't have confidence in Hendon Hooker. Like, eventually. He's 25 years old right now. So you can't deny the guy will be better and better. I'm excited to see his development. So we'll see.
Trust me, I believe in Hendon Hooker.
But I want to make this clear, too, because people, when you say you don't want to extend Goff, they think you hate him. I don't hate Goff. I appreciate Goff. I think the Lions are very fortunate to have Jared Goff. Where I give pushback is that price tag. And that doesn't mean I hate Goff. That just means That's a lot of money, Sam Flannel.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money if you're talking about valuable players, like foundational players. I think Jonah Jackson, you want to re-sign him. Amon-Ra, you're going to have to re-sign him. Penei Sewell, you're going to want to re-sign him. Like, there's guys that you got to pay. And to be honest with you, I'd rather pay those guys.
Well,
and if that's called hating Jared Goff, then so be it.
No,
I mean, it's not about that.
It is not hating Jared Goff. And as the great Ringo Starr said in the movie Help, when it comes to Jared Goff, there's more than meets the eye. It's not just he had a great season, the offense was great. He's going to be our quarterback of the future. That's why it is a salary cap league, and you have to take all of that into account. And you also have to take into account that the last 3 years, I mean, I said at the beginning, he took a 3-year break from even being on the NFL top 100. And I'm not saying that's everything, but that is something. He's got to validate what he did last year 100% before I even think of giving him $45-50 million a year. And even then, I might not do it.